It is really my pleasure, my distinct pleasure, to introduce our keynote speaker today, Dr. Pat Levitt. He is described as both a gene hunter and a developmental neuroscientist. Dr. Levitt has spent much of his life dedicated to the science of promoting health and education of young children. His research has focused on such issues as finding the genes and environmental factors that increase risk for autism and schizophrenia. The research is identifying the most powerful influences on building healthy brain architecture that are responsible for skill development and productivity over a lifetime. Dr. Levitt is an elected fellow of the American Association for the Academy of Science, a member of numerous editorial boards of scientific journals, and a member of the Dana Alliance for Brain Initiatives, the National Scientific Council on the Developing Child, and the National Advisory Mental Health Council. He received his doctorate degree in neuroscience at the University of California in San Diego and completed a postdoctoral fellowship in neuroscience at Yale University School of Medicine. Dr. Levitt is in the process of making his own transition at this moment. He is leaving Vanderbilt University and to the University of Southern California to become director of the Zilkha Neurogenetic Institute at the Keck School of Medicine. So he's going from one little Hollywood to the big Hollywood, from Nashville to LA. It's actually a great move for him. His 2 adult children live in Los Angeles. We had a wonderful chat over lunch today. Please welcome Dr. Pat Levitt.
Well, this is a cozy little group, huh? Okay. I think this is the, can you hear me? I'm wearing a lavalier mic. Okay. This is the best choreographed group I have ever seen in my life. It's unbelievable. As I saw the people lining up on that side, I leaned over and I said, well, I might get started at 1:30 or 2 o'clock. But you guys are really... Hello, there you go. So, contrary to popular belief, the most difficult time to give a talk is not during lunch, it's after lunch. So, can I see all of you raise your hands and flap them and all? There we go. Okay, very good. All right. So I just want to point out that my claim to fame is not in science, at least from my perspective. It's not in science, it's not in research, but I was coach of the year in Little League for my son when he was 11 years old. Thank you. And I gave up on soccer because the parents were right on the sidelines. Way too close for us. So I have about 25 minutes. I've wasted 3 or 4 right now. And I know the clock is on me. We had a conversation last week about this. I want to bring some science to what all of you have been doing, and sometimes I feel like I'm preaching to the choir. When I talk to business leaders, I think what I talk about surprises them to some extent. When I talk to pediatricians, believe it or not insulting any pediatricians here, it surprises them to some extent because pediatricians really do not get, during their time in medical school, the kinds of things that you're focusing on here. And someday that's my next goal, is to actually revising medical curriculum, because as you heard yesterday, half the time that a pediatrician's office spends with a family is not about taking care of sore throats or the flu or other ailments. It's really about understanding the dynamics of family, the dynamics of that family in the community, and the kinds of things that they can do to assist the family in getting the right help. And I think that's really, really important. That's going to be part of the solution. And there are more and more healthcare professionals, nurses and pediatricians, who are beginning to recognize that. So I'm going to talk about the impact of early experience on the development of children. And I spend most of my time talking about adverse experiences because it turns out that's where most of our research falls. We don't have a lot of research on all the great positive things that help. We know it. Intuitively, we know it. We know it because we can see that the kinds of interactions that we develop early on are those things that are most salient to an infant as they develop, from infant to toddlerhood, from toddlerhood to childhood, and on. But let me show you If you take anything from this talk at all, here it is here. What I consider to be the ultimate disconnect. So you see the blue line, well, the blue line represents brain malleability. The brain is still developing early on. We know that early experiences drive this process to a large extent, this thing that you've heard about gene by environment. I'm going to talk about that in a little while, but look at that curve. But by the time they're 10 years old, and you know this with the children with whom you work, with your own family members, you know, that temperament is set pretty early. Those characteristic features are set very, very early. And look where we spend our money. On spending on health, education, and welfare, right? We spend more of it during the period of time when the brain is less accessible to being changed. Now, does that make sense? Anybody? If anybody thinks that makes sense, raise your hand and we're going to throw the tomatoes at you. No. Okay, so this is what we have to fix. And by the way, this is just one example where policy is not driven by science. Policy is driven by history, it's driven by feelings, it's driven by cultural issues. It's not driven by what we understand about how children develop, how the brain develops, and the kinds of factors that influence that in a positive way, and the kinds of factors that we know increase risk for problems that are going to occur for a lifetime. So building healthy brain architecture, what are the ingredients? Well, we know that some of the ingredients are the genes that we inherit from mom or dad. There's no getting around that. My father was 6 feet. My brothers are 6 feet 2. I'm 6 feet 2. You know, brown hair, brown eyes, annoying habits that my brothers and I have, as my wife points out to me all the time. You guys all do the same thing. You scratch your nose like this all the time. Some things we just inherit from mom or dad, but these genes are not cement. They require experiences from the outside world in order to work. They don't work independent. And that's where early experiences really matter, both during fetal development, and I know that people focus on 0 to 5, but things don't start at birth. They start before birth, right? Keep that in mind. This group knows that. So what the brain doesn't know is how to filter, I don't want to pay attention to the negative experiences, I want to pay attention to the positive experiences. It doesn't work that way. Experience, getting a stimulus over and over and over and over again, whether it's abuse or neglect. Neglect is an experience, right? It's the absence of social interaction. Just as powerful on the brain architecture as abuse. The brain doesn't filter that. It's an experience, so it adjusts to that, it adapts to that, it develops on the basis of those experiences, and it changes brain architecture and chemistry for a lifetime. And I'm going to tell you why. So genes provide the hardware, our experiences provide the software, and you've all heard about that. Now, we tend to focus mostly on learning and educational issues, but I want to give you another take-home message that the brain doesn't work in silos. Well, here's the part where we experience emotion. It is an integrated process. And I'm going to show you that, and I'm going to show you why it's an integrated process. So